We did it, y'all. We brought this beautiful being earthside. This was my second home birth. It was a painless, incredibly pleasurable, and joyful experience. The whole 4 hours that it took, it was it was really an easy and amazing labor, and it was something that I prepared for if you've seen any of my other videos. And I'm really excited to share with you the birth story. Yeah. You think so too? You excited to hear how you were born? Before we get into it, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to my channel for more health and homesteading content. So I did not birth this baby this size. She's about 11 pounds now. She was 7 pounds, 11 ounces when she was born. And this is 40 days later, probably 42 days later, after I had this amazing birth for this baby. And that's because I wanted to honor the first 40 days, which is its own incredible postpartum journey that I'll do a separate video about, that promotes rapid healing and bonding with baby and successful breastfeeding and so much more. So make sure you subscribe to my channel for really awesome content to come. In the past 40 days, I have been just nourishing myself, bless you, and the baby, and resting and healing and journaling. And so I actually wrote down my birth story in my journal because I wanted to remember so many details. And in order to share with you the birth story in completion, I'm going to read some of my birth story, and then I'm also going to talk to you more about the painless birth in detail and all the incredible tools and strategies I used to get there. So just as a preface to this birth story, I did have a home birth prior. It was different. It was 14 hours in a different city, in a different house, and it was great. Um, I definitely wish that I knew what I knew now, because what I knew going into this definitely had a major impact on the ease and painless labor that I was so blessed to have. I will also say that as much as I was preparing and going into this knowing that I was going to have a painless birth, I knew that there was a small chance, up to God, that I might have to go to the hospital. So I had my hospital bag packed, but the chances of me having to be transported to a hospital were less than 6%. Every midwife typically has a percent rate for transport. And so when you are working with a midwife, you will get an idea of what percent chance there is, and you have to decide if you're willing to take that chance. Knowing the pros and cons of having a home birth versus a hospital birth and how that affects mom and baby postpartum, I chose to move forward with this home birth. I knew that I could do it, God willing. And so I had my hospital bag packed. There's a really small chance that one would have to go to the hospital, but I went into this knowing that everything that I could control, I would largely my mind and the environment, and then leave it up to God from there. So it was midnight on December 23rd when I had my first contraction. And I had a bunch of Braxton Hicks contractions throughout my pregnancy, especially in the third trimester. And so leading up to this birth, there were many times where I thought to myself, is this it? Could this be it? But at midnight, they were strong, they were consistent. I knew that this could likely be it. So I got up to go to the bathroom because one of the first tips I got from my midwife team and doula was to pee as much as possible. You want to empty your bladder, empty your bowels as much as possible to make space for the descent of the baby. So I went to pee, I got back in bed, and my husband checked in on me. And I told him, chuckling, I think this is really happening. And he reminded me at that point that the midwife said that if it happened at nighttime, to do my best to get as much sleep as possible. So we didn't even bother texting the midwives. I just tried to go back to sleep. And the reason for that is because oxytocin naturally is released in our sleep. And oxytocin is one of our methods for managing pain with contractions. And so if you can get yourself to rest and relax and sleep, you are still actively working if you are in labor, but it is just easing it and it's giving you energy to save for when it gets really intense. So I will say it wasn't easy to try to sleep, but I was able to kind of fall in and out of sleep until 2 a.m. when I experienced such a strong contraction. My water broke, and I told Emery, text the midwives, let them know that my water broke. This is happening. And so he also knew that that was his signal to get the birthing tub set up, to change the sheets. One thing that we did this round as well with my first home birth is we put a new set of sheets on the bed and then put a plastic or vinyl cover on top and then put our old dirty sheets on top. So if I wanted to labor in bed, I could. And then afterwards, it would be easy to strip them off and just have a really nice, clean, comfortable bed to lay in. So he was working on getting things set up, and I knew that he wanted to get those things set up. So the very first thing I did was I hopped into the shower, and I knew that the hot water on my back would be a great relief during contractions. And I had already been focusing on my breath work up to this point, but it definitely started getting to the point where like breath work alone was not pushing me through or moving me through these contractions. Sometimes people call them rushes. Sometimes people call them other names like rushes because it helps them not look at it as a painful experience. I don't mind calling them contractions. Our uterus is contracting, which is pushing everything out. And so, for me, it didn't mess with like my uh, mental state being positive or negative, calling them or identifying them as contractions. But what I did make sure to do was to start moaning deep, low groans. And I found my go-to words were God and open. Both words have a big O shape. And apparently, when you make that O shape, the other orifices of your body will mimic that shape. And so I wanted to create a big O. I wanted to open. I wanted that to be the main focus, opening up so that way she could have an easy descent. Another piece for her having such an easy descent was spinning babies. So for the 3 months leading up to birth, I was getting massages from my husband about 5 nights a week from spinningbabies.com in order to move my baby in the optimal position, which is on my left side with her back facing out. And that way, during labor, I'm not dealing with all the contractions of her having to move into that position or into the best possible position to move down. So that was a big piece of it. So I was in the shower, and every time a contraction came on, I was breathing in, breathing out, and I was sounding out the words God and open. And that really helped to get me through initially, along with the hot water on my back. I wanted to try to get in different positions in the shower, but they started coming on so fast at that point that I just held on to the walls and allowed the contractions to come. I knew that a major piece to having a painless labor would be submission. So I had to get into the state of just opening myself up and being totally okay and good with this experience. I don't call it a pain-free labor because I was very aware that pain could be there if I let it. But I was so focused on my work that I was doing that it was painless. I wasn't experiencing the pain, even though I know that it could be there. I wasn't experiencing pain. So about after 5 to 7 contractions in the shower, I was ready to get out. And my husband had kind of set up this little space next to my bed with our little fireplace and my blanket where I found super comfortable and decided to kind of hone and nest in while he was still getting things ready. And one of the funniest things I think about my birth was that, as much as my husband and I had prepared on all these different positions and massages and techniques that we could do to help ease labor, speed up labor, there was one thing I didn't tell him to do that I remembered when I was laboring in the corner of my room. I was on my knees with my hands like over the bed, and I told him to shake my butt cheeks and my thighs vigorously. And like he started, and I was like, no, harder. Like I read that when you shake all of that, it is releasing tension in your pelvic floor. And of course, that release of tension makes it much easier for baby to go down. It makes it much easier for you physically when you're going through the contractions to let go, let loose, stay super loose. I was doing the strawberry kisses, I think they're called, or the horse lips. Everything I could do just to stay super loose. And so every time I had a contraction, I told him shake, and he was shaking behind me. And that got me through transition. Like the part where it's really getting intense, really could be difficult work. The shake was everything for me. And so I had him do that. I told him at one point to kiss me, and he gave me a sweet little peck. And I said, no, I want like a full kiss. And so we had this passionate kiss that also releases a rush of oxytocin, and that's going to help relieve pain. And so all of these things I was doing, the low moaning, the low groans, the squats, all of these things just made the contractions feel like just work, like painless, but really intense nonetheless, spiritual work. And it was at this point that my husband had said he felt like he had clones of himself because in between contractions, he would be trying to work on the tub. And the midwives arrived 40 minutes after we texted them. And, he was like doing all these things. And I had to like pull him and be like, shake, shake, shake. And so there wasn't much time in between, but he was doing all these things. And when he had to leave to get the midwives, that was the first contraction that I had to move through alone. And at that point, I felt like a little glimpse of fear, like, oh my gosh, I don't know, like he's been my rock through these contractions. Can I do it? And so it was a great centering moment when I was like, God, you are number one. Focus on God, number one. And I went through all my things and focused on him. And that got me through that one alone contraction. The midwives had told me that with any level of monitoring, but even when they would arrive, my contractions would slow down. So imagine how much more difficult and lengthening the process can be when you're at a hospital. Monitoring extends labor and it makes you less comfortable. There's been studies to show that with the more monitoring comes the less amount of progress in labor in both animals and humans. And the longer the labor, the more difficult the labor. And sure enough, when they arrived, it was the perfect time for me to step into the tub, and my contractions started to slow for a very short period because I had already moved through transition. As soon as I stepped into the tub, the water was warm. It felt amazing. And it was at this point that Emery got on the other side of the tub facing me. And another tip I had learned and read about and prepared for was to keep my eyes open. Because if I were to close my eyes, it would be easier to withdraw within to myself, withdraw into what I was feeling versus looking outward and getting outside of myself. So I kept my eyes open, locked in on him. The water felt amazing. And as soon as I had stepped into getting into the water, I felt the urge to push. So I was officially in the pushing zone. And with every push, I had visualized an activity that I had done with my doula a couple weeks prior, where you take a balloon and put a golf ball into the balloon and blow up the balloon, and then the golf lay the golf ball at the very bit of the hole so that way the air in the balloon stays. And my husband and I each had one of these balloon golf ball setups, and you push on the balloon at the top, which is very much like our uterus contracting. And you can watch the golf ball descend through that very tiny, narrow opening. And so I had that visualization as I could feel her descending, which was really exciting. I kept my hand on my perineum because I knew that as soon as I felt her head, that would also be a rush of oxytocin, and that I would not feel any pain. I'd feel overwhelming joy. I would practice my slow, deep breathing of 5.5 seconds in, 5.5 seconds out. And that, plus the deep groans and looking at Emery as he was smiling at me, got me through. And to the point where I wasn't feeling any pain. It was just the hard work. I'm going to read this little part because I just think the words are so perfect. Emery was smiling, holding my arms, telling me how good I was doing, that he loved me. Between his focused eyes, big smiles, words of affirmation, and then deep humming as I groaned low, the transition and pushing stage felt like complete bliss, something I will never forget the power of. It is one of my favorite memories so far in our life together. So I didn't know this even until like a couple weeks ago, but I thought that the midwives had suggested Emery moan with me, and they didn't. He just picked it up himself and started doing that. So we were looking at each other, staring as he was moaning with me during each contraction. Meanwhile, I could feel her head descend lower and lower until I kept my hand on my perineum to feel the very beginning of her entry. It was around here that the ring of fire contraction felt great. I smiled back at Emery and chuckled. He and the midwives kept telling me I was doing great and replaced cold rags on my head and neck. The hot water was very hot and it felt good that was very hot. So the cold rags on my neck and head were very soothing, and they were, of course, offering me sips of water to keep me hydrated. Finally, I felt her head crown and said out loud, "She's here." With a deeper, more growling groan, she popped out. I was ecstatic and relieved. I knew the rest would be easy. I was amazed at how long her head felt underwater. She slipped out at 4:14 a.m. I took a deep guttural breath, and as soon as I held her, I saw a glow around her and a big smile, something that didn't replicate in the video that I had taken of me while I was pushing her out. I laughed, cried in joy, kissed Emery. The midwives needed to get her breathing and heart rate up, so they put her in a good position and rubbed her back and hands, and she let out a strong cry. It took longer and was harder than I remembered to deliver the placenta, so the ladies gave me a tincture to help with that, and shortly after, the placenta was delivered. Once the placenta was delivered, the ladies, everybody got me up, got me in bed, and took care of me, took care of the baby, cleaned everything up, and we were just in joy. Finally, around 6:30, my daughter woke up, and my husband went to go pick her up and said, "I have a little surprise for you. She's here." And Cece was like, "What? She's here?" She came in and the smile on her face was just absolutely glorious. And I'd say one of the other really special pieces to this was the guidance of my doula in breastfeeding, because even though I had gotten guidance the first time around with my home birth, for some reason things didn't click. And I'll do a whole nother video on breastfeeding, but the tips that she gave me to get that initial latch in and work on that latch was everything. So at 6:30, we were all just in bed in the morning, and I stayed in bed. The midwife, or my doula, made me some scrambled eggs and sourdough and butter and fed me while I nursed my baby. And I stayed in bed and relaxed. And it was just amazing. We were so overjoyed. It was the best experience. I mean, with the first home birth, I said to Emery the next day, I could easily do that again. Let's do this again. But it was not much like this one in the sense that I didn't have all these little tools like the shake or the hum or the deep low groans or keeping my eyes open or the hot water. All those things played such a part, plus just the visualization and confidence and trust in God and in myself that I was capable to have a painless labor. It's something that I wish everyone could have the opportunity to experience. And although there's always going to be a small chance for a healthy woman to have to go to a hospital for a transport, I would highly recommend every woman look into this option if they can, because I believe that birth, pregnancy, and labor and postpartum and caring for our children is a birthright for women. It's an experience of a lifetime, perhaps the most important experience of our lifetime. And so to set ourselves up with an experience in the best possible way is really important for our mental and physical health and for that of our following generations. I hope you've enjoyed this video. It's been such a joy to share it with you. And if you have any questions, please make sure to comment them below. And I look forward to sharing all the other pieces of this journey from breastfeeding to postpartum support, because there's so much more to share, y'all. There is so much more to share. If you enjoyed this video, please like it, hit that subscribe button for more health and homesteading content. I look forward to sharing with you again soon.